I think it's no mystery to anyone what happened with FNAF Plus, a highly acclaimed, anticipated, and loved fan game by the community that fell from grace as it was the first official remake of Five Nights at Freddy's, where we would have redesigns of characters, mechanics, story, gameplay, and many more aspects from one of the most talented yet controversial developers the community has had. However, this fan game was nothing but smoke and mirrors, and just when it seemed to be on the right track, it ran aground on an island of discontinuous development and a limbo from which not even we know what will happen. This is why in this video, I've decided to dust off FNAF, since many people, including myself, had high expectations about this game to try to see if it was really a project worth it, and if there might be a chance for Scott to bring it back. Before we start, I suggest you comment, like, and activate the notification bell, as this way you support me a lot and feed the algorithm so it keeps recommending these videos. Remember to subscribe since few who watch are subscribed. If you want to support, don't hesitate. With nothing more to say, good morning, afternoon, or evening. Let's get started. To start, let's dissect this topic a bit to understand what the heck FNAF Plus was. This, as we have mentioned before, was the most ambitious fan game made official in the franchise. As most of you may know, the Fazbear Fanverse is an initiative proposed by Scott Cawthon several years ago, where he aimed to officialize some fan games, fund them, and allow them the freedom to sell merchandise and become part of the official games and offerings of Five Nights at Freddy's. Games included Pop Ghost, The Joy of Creation, Five Nights at Candy's, One Night at Flumptus, and FNAF. Unfortunately, out of these, only 3 survived and only one of them is showing signs of progress. The point is that this crazy initiative was born because Scott saw the potential that many young developers had in making games inspired by the classics he created. Most of these already had a certain and determined popularity within the franchise, but only one of them would have the freedom to work on their own project that would be part of the official games, although not canon, of the FNAF saga. This would be Fiston, also known as Phil Moore, an independent developer from Chile who had already worked on other FNAF games like His Shadow over Freddys or the well-known title Pork Chops. His inclusion in this initiative came as a result of his previous work on a canceled FNAF fan game by Scott himself. Another FNAF fan game, open source, which had to have this curious name because it had been removed several times from the GameJolt platform. And why, you might be wondering? Easy. Since this game was a recreation of Five Nights at Freddy's 2, but in an open source mode, meaning it was open code for everyone to modify as they wish, and it replicated and imitated part of the original code of Five Nights at Freddy's 2, only within the Game Maker engine. This was obviously a huge problem, as it was essentially piracy, just on a much larger scale. And it's not the first time Scott has banned or modified FNAF fan games for this same issue. Months before the removal of this fan game, Scott went on to remove a FNAF fan game created by a guy who sought to modify the first Five Nights at Freddy's to its maximum splendor, with many improvements in graphics, techniques, mechanics, and many options that you naturally couldn't have in this game. It even happened with the first The Return to Freddy's, a super mega classic FNAF fan game that was previously simply called 3, as it was one of the first fan games released before the official release of the 3rd installment. I understand that Scott Cawthon ended up rewarding the creator at the time, which allowed him to continue with the saga, but the rest is history. The point is that recognizing Fiston's potential and work within a promising title gave it a second chance, a golden opportunity to work on a new project for the franchise. Thus, Phil would join the Fazbear Fanverse, and under the direction of Scott Cawthon and Click Tim, FNAF would be born, the first and only official remake of Five Nights at Freddy's that aimed to change mechanics, characters, story, gameplay, and everything you could imagine. It was like seeing a reboot of the saga, but in a non-canonical way, having its own continuity, and thus this ambitious project emerged that captivated the fandom from the very first moment. After the release of several teaser trailers, VHS, and other content that practically became lost media, the project seemed to be going full steam ahead. Everything it was showing us, from gameplays, images, a Steam page, and more, seemed to have a promising direction and really excited the community. I covered a lot of news about this project, as it seemed like a genuinely good proposal, but over time, it fell out of favor. While much of the community outside Twitter loved the project, another noisy part discredited and hated it for its noticeable changes. The first change was the design. The design was one of the things fans hated most about this game. Many said the design was completely nonsensical, forcing terror onto characters that were supposed to be scary since they worked well in both cheerful and gloomy settings. This was one of the strongest arguments that created a huge animosity towards this project and its creator, saying that the design seemed to forcefully emphasize the dark side of FNAF and were essentially a poorly made copy of the animatronics that Scott Cawthon had already established. The second change that people hated was its development time. Although FNAF was showing quite a bit of progress on the game, the truth is that there wasn't a clear date and it wasn't exactly known when it could be released. FNAF's attitude as a developer was never the most professional when it came to his audience, and the poor working relationship he had with Scott Cawthon, along with many harsh criticisms towards other original FNAF games and involved studios like Stipple Studios and the disastrous launch of FNAF Security Breach, created a gap from which Phil could not escape. Now he faced a lot of criticism, arguments, and counter-arguments about his video game that caused a huge discord in the community. This was in addition to the enormous controversy before his last retirement, where after several strong criticisms of the FNAF Security Breach DLC and certain violent content that was sent to various users, as well as fights on the social network Twitter, this project ended up being brutally paused by Scott Cawthon. Later, Phil claimed he would leave FNAF development, withdrawing from the community to focus on his own projects, games, and streams he maintains today. Meanwhile, FNAF News was removed from Steam, and all its accounts and content were shelved somewhere in the archives of Scott Cawthon, Filmo, or Click Team, leaving it completely canceled. I'm not going to give my opinion on this controversy, because honestly it's not worth it, and both F and the rest of the people moved on with their lives. So I'm just going to focus on what happened next with this project and if it was worth it. So was it worth waiting for or wanting to see this FNAF Plus? Was it as good as they proposed and as people see it? Well, if you ask me, yes, it was worth it. FNAF was not only going to be a remake with better graphics of Five Nights at Freddy's 1, it was going to be the most ambitious one ever seen. It was not only going to have a completely unique story from the original, but also likely start the first official reboot of the FNAF saga. How much could we expect? We all know that the story of FNAF is made up on the fly. That's no mystery, but having a project like this with a story plan from the beginning would give us an entirely different perspective on the story compared to what we had within the official canon. Additionally, the game was going to include a lot more than just being a remaster of the first game. It would feature different mechanics and new animatronics never seen before available for the custom night, such as the mediocre melodies. It would feature different story clues, innovative mechanics, and more elements that make us want to play it repeatedly. It wasn't just a remaster or a remake and that's it. It was something different, and that was good. The puppet was going to have much more presence, and the game in general seemed to be too good, maybe too good to be true. Unfortunately, we all already know what happened, and that's that. We don't know if Scott Cawthon will take up the idea in a different direction or make a remake since he's retired, but who knows what the future holds. Personally, I think it was a project that was really worth it, but maybe it wasn't the right time for us to have it. FNAF is going through many abrupt changes, and the best thing would be to have something fresh to rely on if the series continues to be so changeable. Something new, something that attracts both new and old fans to get to know this series again. But tell me what you think below. Do you think FNAF will be worth it? I'll be reading the comments below. With nothing more to say, I'm Prof6 and see you next time.